Hi, Zach Rizer here, and I'm back with another bass effects demo. So today we're going to jump into the Electro Harmonix Iron Lung Vocoder. Very cool, simple little effect. I'm going to go through and show the basic settings of the pedal, kind of show how I think it works or functions best with a bass, and then also at the end I'll show kind of some fun combinations you can use to kind of create some textures that are a little bit above and beyond what just the Iron Lung can do by itself. So as usual, here's my bass's dry tone, although we're never really going to hear this for the whole video, but this is my Dingwall ABZ 6-string on the neck pickup. Okay, so jumping into the pedal, it essentially has three controls: a mic gain input, the tone of the vocoder, and then also they call it the gender, but really it's just the frequency response of the vocoder. For the whole video, I am going to leave the mic gain input on the medium setting. This is just basically how loud you have to talk into the microphone to get it to open up the vocoder. I've found sometimes live on a stage that I do have to use the low setting. If I have a really loud monitor blasting in my face, the monitor will actually cause the vocoder to react all the time rather than just when I'm talking. But for the most part, the medium setting seems to work great with an SM58. Okay. So you'll find with any vocoder, unless it has built-in distortion or dirt, it doesn't respond too cleanly to just a dry bass, especially single notes. There isn't enough frequency response in the single note of my bass to give the vocoder much to work with. So I'll demonstrate that here. This is just my dry bass running into the Iron Lung with the current settings. And you'll hear you don't get a very clear vocal sound from it.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung, check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2, mic check 1, 2, yeah.
So you can hear some vocal characteristics there, but it doesn't clearly represent what I'm actually saying. But if you put on a little bit of distortion, it gives it more upper harmonics to work with, so that you really start hearing those vocal effects. So here's the same setup, but with a little bit of this tube drive setting from the Source Audio OFD, running into the Iron Lung.
Mic check 1, 2, mic check, Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
So here you get a little bit more of that vocal characteristic coming out. Now, what I actually usually run into my vocoder, however, is an incredibly high gain fuzz, which sounds hilarious by itself. And you would think that would cause the vocoder to sound harsh or ugly, but really what it does is it gives it that full frequency range to use for your vocal response. It's also gated so that it doesn't create a bunch of noise when I'm not talking. But you really start to hear the vocal artifacts come out when you run this high gain fuzz into the Iron Lung. Here's that setup.
Mic check 1, 2, hello, Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung, oh yeah.
Really start to hear it pop out now. Now, of course, you could run a lighter distortion in there if you want. You could put an even heavier fuzz in there if you want. It's whatever character you want. Some people might feel like this gated fuzz setting is a little bit too bright for their tastes, but for me, I really like it. So now that we have our bass kind of set up here, let me show you what the other two knobs do. So the tone knob is just that. If I crank the tone way down, you get a darker sound.
Mic check 1, 2, mic check 1, 2, yeah.
Cranking the tone way up, it becomes incredibly brittle and way too bright.
Mic check 1, 2, mic check 1, 2, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put that tone back to a medium setting. And now for fun, we'll crank the gender bender way up into the higher range. This gives you that kind of Alvin and the Chipmunk sound.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
Sounds pretty ridiculous. Let's crank it all the way down. Now you get into the almost like Silence of the Lambs creepy low voice here.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
Now, this is actually pretty fun for some bass work, which we'll get into later. But for the rest of the video, or at least most of the time, I'm going to put the gender bender kind of right in the middle again. Okay, so now we can use the Electro Harmonic lung for single kind of vocal line stuff, something like this maybe.
I want you to stay with me tonight, baby. How are you feeling? How are you feeling, baby?
We also could drop down into the low register and do some bass line work. Yet again, can turn that gender bender down a little bit if you want some low stuff.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Electro Harmonix, Iron.
You can really hear, especially with this gated fuzz setting, all of the hard T's and S's and ch sounds really come through the vocoder, for instance.
Chick, 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 suck. Chicka, 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 chicka.
Which you can have fun with to make some kind of percussive rhythms, which I'll get into in a minute. So let's go beyond just the dry bass. What happens if we run the Boss OC2 into the gated fuzz, into the iron lung? So here's the Boss OC2 into the gated fuzz by itself. Now into the iron lung.
Hello, oh, do, 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 Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
Okay. Let's turn that gender bender all the way down just for fun.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
Okay. Let's try putting some chords into here. I'm going to use a slightly lighter gain distortion just for fun. So let's try just a simple major chord.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
Now you can hear that you still get a pretty good vocal quality even though I'm using a lower gain drive, and that's because I have more frequencies coming through since I'm doing chords rather than single notes. Just for a reference, I'll put a higher gain drive in there and do the same thing. So this is from the MXR Distortion.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
Very cool. Okay. Now one thing I've recently had some fun with is you can actually control the rhythm of what you're playing with what you're doing with your mouth, almost like beatboxing, rather than controlling it with your fingers. So for instance, I can just hold a minor 7 chord like this.
Hello.
But now if I beatbox a little bit, you get something like this. Very cool effect. I did that in a solo video that I put up that I'll link below if you want to hear that effect some more. You can of course do the same beatboxing idea but with a kind of a bass line roll, same concept. Cool. Okay, so we've seen it with chords with the OC2. Let's try seeing what happens just for fun if we stack some modulations on afterwards. So how about a phaser? So without the phaser,
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
with the phaser.
Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung, oh yeah. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung. Electro Harmonix, Iron Lung.
How about a flanger for fun?
Electro Harmonix,
How about a harmonic tremolo? This one's pretty fun.
oh, Check 1, 2, yeah. Electro Harmonix. Iron Lung.
Really fun to get these vocal textures coming through something like a tremolo. Last thing I'll show, this isn't anything crazy, but it's a way that I use it all the time, which is using the Electro Harmonix into something like a big reverb for vocal lines. So here's a nice big reverb from the Eventide H9.
If you want me to stay, just tell me. If you want me to stay, yeah, just tell me, okay.
Let's try a big hall reverb.
If you want me to stay, if you want me to stay, just tell me today, yeah.
And lastly, let's try a big tape delay, just for fun. I'll put some reverb on too.
If you want me to stay, just tell me today. If you want me to stay, just tell me today.
All right. So hopefully you got to hear at least how it responds with bass, how it responds with distortion, without distortion. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe below. I'll be back very shortly with some more pedal demos and some performance videos. Have a good one.